Okay, welcome. So, we're talking about functions. What are functions? Functions are the building blocks of readable, maintainable, and reusable code. Okay, a function is a set of statements to perform a specific task. Functions organize the program into logical blocks of code. Once defined, functions may be called to access code. This makes the code reusable. Moreover, functions make it easy to read and maintain program code. Right. So a function is just basically a building block, all right, for our code. We are going to be writing that programs, all right, that code, and the building block of our entire code structure of our entire code is going to be functions. All right. So see it as, yeah, just as the name implies, a building block. Okay, the same way you cannot build a house without blocks. You cannot build software without functions. Right? And every function has what it does. It has its functions, right? Has its functionalities, has what it does. Okay, so that is what we are going to be looking at in this lesson. All right. So defining a function. How are functions defined? So a function definition specifies what and how a specific task will be done. Okay. So before using a function, take note of this, before using a function, it must be defined. Okay. Before using a function, it must be defined. I said you should take note of this. All right. The syntax for defining a standard function is given below. Okay, so they gave us a syntax for defining a function, a standard function. All right, which is this. So a function name, parentheses, and then curly brackets, or this void. Okay, void. That one I probably just had void. Yeah. So or void function name, and so on and so forth. All right. So this is just a syntax for defining a function. Now I believe this looks familiar. All right, this looks familiar. This is what our main function looks like. All right, void main. So this is our main function, just resembles this one exactly. The only difference is the name. All right, so starting with the main function, what did I say the main function is? The main function is the entry point into our code, all right, into our entire DAT program, right? So meaning that it is what the compiler is going to look at and execute our code, execute everything that we have written. So the main function basically scaffolds everything else, right? It scaffolds everything else for us. It is the function that executes our code. All right, you get that? So we can have different kinds of functions. All right, we have different kinds of functions. Like, okay, I can have a function called my name, and I want this function to just print my name. That's all. Okay, so what I can do is I can just call this function my name. All right, Now this is a function definition. Now remember what I said you should take note of. All right, let me leave this comment. Remember what I said you should take note of. This statement, that before using a function it must be defined. Now this is a function definition. All right, this is a function that we have defined. And this is a function call. All right, so this function that I defined right here, I have called it here. Okay, so what does it do? It just prints my name. Okay, this is all it does. So if I run this code, I'll just have, this function executed in the main function. All right, and then I'll have my name. All right, so that's how it works. All right, so this is a simple function definition. All right, just as we did, this function was defined here, right? And then it was called in the main function. Whenever you want to call a function, you have to call it in another function, usually the main function. All right, so you're calling your function so that it will be executed. All right, so that's it. This is how a function is called. This is called a function call. All right, if I had just had this, this is not a function call. All right, so I didn't get anything printed. So in order to call a function, you must have parentheses. It just looks like what we did in properties, right? When we looked at data types and the different properties for manipulating data types, right? For example, I have a string that says hello. All right, now one of the functions for manipulating strings is something like code unit at. Okay, code unit at. So this is actually a function call, right? This is how it works. All right, I'm going to talk about objects soon. All right, I believe in module 3 we'll talk about objects, but I just want to know that this is how a function call works. In the same way, this is a function call. All right, so let's get back to what we are talking about. All right, so we have looked at function call. You know what a function call is, right? Now, returning functions. Functions may also return value along with the control back to the caller. Such functions are called as returning functions. Okay. So these functions may also return value along with the control back to the caller. Yeah. Such functions are called returning functions. So when a function is executed, right, it can return a value back to the caller. Let's see what this means. Okay, there's a syntax here. All right, so this particular function declaration has something called return type. Okay, it has something called a return type. So what is return type? It says the return type can be any valid data type. All right, and then of course we have this return statement. Okay, The return statement is optional. If not specified, the function returns null. The data type of the value returned must match the type. The data type of the value returned must match the return type of the function. A function can return at most one value. In other words, there can only be one return per function. Example. So we have an example here. Alright. Okay. So let's look at this concept. Right now, this function, right, assumes a return type of dynamic. Okay, meaning that any value can be returned from it. But first, let's look at void functions. Now, just like main, right? Just like main, we can have void functions. Now, what this void means is that we are not expecting any value, or rather, this function does not return any value. Alright, after execution, it does not return any value. It just has one duty, which is to execute whatever we write in here, to execute its statements. Alright, so I can have as many statements as I want inside this function, right? And its only job is to execute those statements. Okay. So what is statement? Statement simply refers to the task or the piece of code you give to a function to execute. That is the statement, right? So what are the return types we have? First, I have looked at void. Void simply means this function is not returning anything, right? Now, I can have a function with a return type of string. Okay, meaning that my function is meant to return a string. Okay, so I will name this return name, and it's just meant to return my name. Okay, now one thing about this is that this function can still have statements. It can still have statements. Okay, so each of these is a statement. Alright, but at the end of everything, I am still returning a value. Alright, so my function can have as many statements as I want it to have. Alright, but it can only have one return statement. Okay, so if you hover on this, you will see it's telling you dead code. This code is a dead code. Just remove it because it's not going to execute. Alright, so only one return statement. So what this thing simply means is that you have given this function a task to perform, right? Which is this: to add these two numbers and to print hello, and it is doing it. Alright, but after performing this task, it is returning a value. Don't know if you get it. It is returning a value. All right, and because this value, the data type of this value is string, right? Your return type must be a string. Like whatever you're returning from this function must be the same as the return type of the function, which is what was explained here. Right? The data type of the value returned must match the return type of the function. Okay, so I cannot return anything else here. I cannot even return this a plus b because it is an int. All right, and a value of type int can be returned from the function because returning because it has a return type of string. All right, so it is just like trying to assign an integer to a string variable. It is not going to work. All right, so that's what it is. Now this variable, this value that I am returning from this string is it is the value that this function now has. All right, what I simply did is it's just like saying string return name, and then I assign it to this value. All right, so what I did with this variable is just like what I did with this function. Okay, only that instead of an assignment operator in the case of a variable, I am using a return statement. All right, so the return statement is simply just doing what this assignment operator is doing here for this variable. Okay, so that's what it is. Now because of that, I can actually save this in a variable. Okay, I can save this in a variable. If I try to save it in an integer, you will see I'm getting this error because the value of this function is string. The return value, the return type of this function is string. So whatever I'm returning to it has to also be a string. Whatever I'm returning from it has to also be a string. All right, so you can see string return name. Now if I happen to print this variable which I've stored this function in, I'm going to have, of course, the function is being called here also. All right, so the function is being executed, but at the end of everything, I'm getting my value printed. All right, I'm getting the value of this function printed. It is being printed. Okay, so I would like you to go over this particular lesson as many times as you can, right, and imbibe it. Okay, because I just laid the foundation of functions, of all that we are going to be doing in functions here. If you understand this lesson, you are going to have an easy ride for the rest of this course, I believe. Okay, so thank you very much, and see you in the next class.